Bible thankfully skips over Jesus' teenage years. So we go straight from the baby to the young man. I read today from Matthew chapter 3, verses 13 through 17. And Jesus came from Galilee to John, who was at the Jordan, baptizing. John would have prevented him from baptizing him, saying to him, "I need to be baptized by you. You come to me." Jesus answered, "Let it be so for now. It is proper this way, that we might fulfill all righteousness." And so John consented. And when Jesus had been baptized, just as he came up from the water, suddenly the heavens were opened above him, and they saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." Earlier this week, I was at a memorial mass, actually also with Judge Griscom. We were attending a mass for a friend of mine, a friend of ours, who's lost his wife to cancer last spring. And on her birthday, the mass was said in her honor. So a group of friends gathered with him at 7 a.m. in the morning to support them in their grief. And after the mass was over, I was teasing all of the lapsed Catholics that were around me, mostly my golfing buddies. We play golf together, all of us. I teased them that the rafters didn't fall in when they showed up at church. They teased me that the rafters didn't fall in when the Protestants showed up for real church. And in between that banner, each of us gave our friend a brotherly hug to start the morning, all of us already late for our morning commute. You know, Woody Allen once said that 90% of life is about just showing up. It's what we do for each other. You may know that when a crow dies, there's a call that goes out, and all the other crows that are in the extended family, that whole tribe, this great clan, actually get the word, and sometimes they come from very far away, but they all fly to the same tree and assume a place on the perch. Sometimes there can be several hundred birds that cover one tree. Now, you probably also know that most species of birds are not related by their extended families, and you probably don't know that most other birds don't have the advanced language skills that crows have. But crows are more sophisticated than most birds, and I am willing to bet they have a more developed emotional life as a result. And when someone dies, they all show up in solidarity, and they grieve with one another over their family loss. And at moments like that, you know, if you can look around yourself and see the faces of people that are around you, this is your church. This is your spiritual community. We humans are embedded people. We need each other. We need to count on each other. That's why faith is such a big concept in Christianity. Not the faith that believes in something unseen. That's probably actually overrated. I'm talking about the faith in people that will show up for you, to be there for you. People who care about you. People who love you. People who, through their caring and their love, are trustworthy. Those are faithful folk. And I know that some of us gather here this morning either annoyed by our families following the holiday season, or maybe even a bit depressed. You have that sinking feeling that your family of birth is simply not able to give you what you'd hope for. They can't celebrate for you. They're not encouraging you in the way that you need them to encourage you. They can't share what your life is really all about the way that you would like them to support. They're more like a drag on the rest of my life. You know, St. Paul really hoped that the church, the spiritual community, could become our adopted home of sorts. He really thought that we could love each other profoundly enough that we could all become a kind of surrogate spiritual family. We could heal each other by doing the things that our birth families cannot do. And that's my hope. And by the way, it's also Mark's hope, and it's also Julie's hope, and it's also Caroline's hope. That's the one thing we all believe in. So we invite you to wade a little deeper into the water together with our congregation. We just went through the season of giving and Christmas and grace. remembering the goodness of the world. But now we have a new year, a new direction, a new orientation. And our text reminds us that for us to do what we actually need to do, for Jesus to do the profound work that he really came to do, warm, gushy butter is not going to be enough. At some point you have to commit. You have to make a choice. You can't do everything. You have to commit to these people. You have to commit to this project. It's the only way we get anything done that's profound in this life. We make choices and we commit. And the big ones we make in public. We stand at the altar and pledge our love to our spouse, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and health, till we are parted by death. Because important things, big things, we do in public because we need the support of our family and friends. And we also need to hold ourselves accountable. And Jesus models this for us. He goes to be baptized, to follow God. He knows his spiritual journey is going to be difficult. It's going to bring him into conflict with the Roman powers and the leaders of institutional religion in Jerusalem. So he takes this plunge in the water, dedicates himself in a new direction. He is going to follow God, come what may. And he doesn't have any idea what's coming next. And thank God we don't, because we probably would never start off in the first place. But we know we need to dedicate ourselves, and you need to dedicate yourselves to the people around you in this community. We need you to be intentional if we're going to accomplish something important together. Our worship is only as good as you are, and we need more of us in small groups to get to know each other deeper. How many people here, by the way, are in a Pneuma group or join one of those? Just see those hands around you. Pneuma is just a word, Greek word for spirit in Greek. These small groups meet regularly to share, to develop deeper friendships. Christ Church is a catalyst where good things just bubble to the surface when profound people find each other. Right now we got this interesting new program that Caroline was talking about. Amanda Block started, No Kid Hungry 07901. We give out groceries on Thursday night. Fresh produce, healthy produce. We've identified families that are at risk through our school system. We invite them directly, and then the word just gets out to everybody else who is in need to make ends meet through the end of the month. Or how about this Women's March on Washington? The church didn't organize that. We just have Republican women, Democratic women, I believe something like 50 of them from our church that are going to be in Washington on January 21st, standing together for women's issues that are important. This new year, we're going to be devoting the bulk of our time together as a congregation to talk about issues of race. Next week, I'm going to talk about white privilege, looking back on my own life, which is pretty easy to do. Then on January 28th, we have Reverend Rod Williams, who's going to come from Fountain Baptist Church to help us explain why African Americans need the rest of us Americans to support them in developing civil rights, because this is about how we all want to live. And we'll have other speakers on different issues during the night, some small groups where we can meet and talk about these issues. Why? Because we don't want to just have the right beliefs. We want to actually become a multicultural, spiritual community ourselves. We want to actually share our lives with people that are not like us, intentionally, because we want to give our children that gift. It's going to make them stronger, more rounded. So we need you to get involved, because you bring important things to the conversation. And you know we live in a challenging time. We have more demands on our time than ever. We have to be intentional about our time. We have to choose what we're going to do. And how are we going to stay connected when we are all so busy? We're pulled this weekend by our extended family, that weekend by a sports tournament, the next weekend by a trip to see college friends. How are we going to stay connected through worship? And we need you to help us solve that challenge. Perhaps you saw the article over the holidays in the Wall Street Journal. It talked about how a number of malls around our country are in difficult straits suddenly because so many people shop online that malls are emptier and emptier during most of the year, yet they're filled with the same expenses. Shopping patterns are changing so rapidly that many of these malls, and who would have thought even 10 years ago, starting to fail. And every business and every nonprofit in our country is experiencing something of these same shifting circumstances. The world is changing around us fast enough that if we're not intentionally changing with it and remaking ourselves, we will come apart. There isn't any book that we can go out there and read. There isn't any expert that we can call in to interpret what's happening around us. We have to figure this out with each other, and we need you to help us do that. Later, last year, we were underfunded at the end of the year by about 10% of what we needed to do to operate. And next year, by the way, we're still underfunded by about 10% of what we're going to need to operate. And the Reverend, of course, can make a few phone calls and find some money at the end of the year frantically or at the beginning of the new year. But it's not just my challenge. At Christ Church, we run ourselves. And these are structural, long-term changes we have to adapt to, and we need you to help us to become wise enough that we can thrive through the next generation. We have two groups of people right now that have signed up to be part with quite a few people in both of them. One of them we're calling the Conspiracy of Goodness. We want to do some good in the world. We were the first church to get involved with Family Promise a couple of generations ago, and what a great program that turned out to be, having homeless into our churches so we could meet each other, the homeless and the housed. We were the first churches a generation ago to start bridges, reaching out to the homeless on the streets of Manhattan so that our children and all the youth of our area could give back and actually serve the homeless and learn what they are going through firsthand. And our kids are better at service today because we gave them that opportunity. So the question is, what goodness do we want to create for this generation that will expand on the previous work that we've done? We need you to help us figure that out. What conspiracy of goodness we're going to have. And we have a communications committee that's forming so that we can connect with each other more effectively and get the word out about what our spiritual community is doing that makes a difference. We need to make it easier for us to invite other people to join us, doing something that's spiritually integrating together to make our world a better place. So we want you to get involved and to share your lives socially, make time for each other, and do things that nurture one another and build one another up. Over the holidays, I got quite a few cards in the mail. They were addressed to me, but really when I read them, I realized they're addressed to you. Because it's what we do all together. One of them came from a woman that we helped on Christmas Eve. I got to her house. A couple of you came with me on Christmas Eve. She was out running an errand and her teenage son was playing a video game. I gave the teenage son an envelope that came from all of us, and I write a little note inside of it. We take the money out of the collection plate on Christmas Eve and literally stuff it in there. I like that big old fat wad. It just seems right. And we put it in there, sealed it up. His mother got home a few minutes later. She wrote me this note: Reverend Rush, I cannot explain briefly just how difficult my life has become this year because I'm a single mother. I have been in despair. Your church is filled with angels to help someone like me, and I will find a way to pass the blessing forward in the future. I got another card from the leaders of St. Augustine and St. Monica's Church. They're the Coptic Egyptian Catholic church that meets here on Saturdays. By the way, good news, they found a place to worship on Sundays for themselves, so we're really happy about that. Soon they will be moving on, at least on their Sunday worship. So they wrote me this note: Reverend Rush, your congregation extended hospitality to us when so many Americans were not so welcoming for us Egyptians. You have been with us from the beginning, giving us a chance to become strong enough to get on our own. Please thank your congregation for their hospitality and support. I got another one that read, Reverend Rush, a few years ago, about this time of year, I had run my life into the shoals with alcohol and drugs. Had damaged my family, lost my job, and was close to ending my life. Shortly after that bad period, someone invited me to one of the AA groups that meets at your church. I've been sober for 3 years. I just wanted to thank you and your church for giving us the space to meet. You've made a difference in my life. A few years ago, I took one of your Christmas Eve gifts to a family that had just moved to our country. Well, one of you told us about them because the wife was actually working in one of your homes. They were political refugees fleeing violence down in Colombia. They were educated, but since they didn't speak the language, came out of Colombia rather quickly. They were fleeing the violence. They were working as day laborers and maids because they couldn't speak English well enough. It was just before Christmas, and we learned that the husband had been taken advantage of by the unscrupulous people that prey on vulnerable immigrants in our community. After he'd worked for several weeks at a job, the guy that hired him wouldn't pay him. So there he was on Christmas Eve, facing eviction. He has no resources. He has no family. He has no friends and neighbors in this area. He's new to our country. And you dads and moms know how awful you can feel about yourself when you can't provide for your children at times like these, and how much self-doubt you can have, how much fear, dreams that keep you up at night. I knocked on the door, and he opened it. I had memorized a couple of lines in Spanish from Google Translate. And I told him that it was the season of angels. He gestured behind him, and there was an angel on the table next to their Christmas tree. It turns out they were Christians. My speech was made much easier because he knew what I was trying to say. His wife was a bit incredulous as to what this European wanted on Christmas Eve, speaking atrocious Spanish to her. I gave them an envelope with a big wad of money. One of the people in our church had supplemented what you gave so that we could basically make up what this guy had lost in wages by being ripped off. I smiled, I said, "Merry Christmas," and I left. I never stay. It's too emotional to receive a gift like that. It's too private, just too vulnerable. I walked back to my car, but they had a basement apartment and there was a window that I could see into their basement. I couldn't help myself that night. Turned back towards that window, looked in to see their reaction. The husband had given this envelope to his wife to open. She started crying when she looked inside. She had her head buried in his chest, and he had his arms holding her around. What a blessed sight that was. You've lived that too. It's that deep imprint spiritually of blessing that makes a concrete difference in other people's lives. You made a miracle in their life. And it's going to be a story of welcome when they came to America. And their kids are going to hear about it. And they're going to grow up and be changed. And stuff is going to happen that is so improbable you wouldn't believe it if I told you. We want you to be part of that conspiracy of goodness. We want you to commit, because what we do together and the forces we bring together when we focus are profound. Join us. Amen.